We spent some time earlier, I think, last week talking about, peanut allergies. I'm not sure exactly why it came up, but it's something that has come up on a regular basis. And then all of a sudden we get a report this week, actually published on Monday, suggesting that a report, or at least a landmark study, if you will, from back in 2017 has actually been working. Dr. David A. Hill is an allergist and researcher at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. He's one of the authors of the study. And Dr. Hill, first of all, thank you for your time this afternoon. And let me begin by asking, my first reaction when I saw this was, this landmark study that I refer to came out 8 years ago. And is it only now we're beginning to find out that it's actually been working?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, Aaron, that was a landmark study. So you're referring to the 2015 LEAP study. It was a randomized controlled trial of 600 kids. They were randomized either to standard peanut introduction timelines or early peanut introduction timelines. And what that study found is that early introduction of peanut reduced the risk of developing peanut allergy significantly by upwards of 70% in some of the long-term data. Now, any public health initiative has sort of three important pillars. The first pillar is the rigorous trial that shows that it works. So that's what we had in 2015. The second pillar are the public health notifications, the recommendations from the major bodies. So the first one came out in 2015. There was a revised version in 2017. And both of those recommendations were specifically related to the early introduction of peanut. So what my group did is we used a large data set from the American Academy of Pediatrics. It was 120,000 children under age 3 years old, and we looked at kids that were born before the recommendations came out in 2015, so that was our comparison group. And then we had two cohorts of kids after 2015, one right after the 2015 recommendations and then one after the 2017 update. And what we asked was whether or not the rates of new onset peanut or any cause food allergy were different between those various groups. And indeed, what we found was that the rates of peanut allergy, new onset peanut allergy, were 34% lower in the post-recommendation group as compared to the pre-recommendation group.
Okay, so I guess one question I have is when I pointed to the timeline suggesting it's been so long, and here's a study that's saying, you know what, it actually does work. Were medical professionals slow to pick up on this, and if so, why?
Well, if anything, you could say it was pretty rapid, right? Because the LEAP trial was in 2015, and the first set of recommendations were also in 2015. Now, with any public health effort, it does take time to sort of communicate those recommendations, make sure that they're being sort of talked about in the right media outlets, including the general media, like we're doing right now. And then it takes time. You have to let time go by before you can actually study the effect, right? So even though it's 2025 now, we were looking back at data from 2017 through 2020 to essentially ask whether or not it had the intended effect.
Okay, fair enough. Let me just get into the details here, because for a lot of parents, obviously, especially with young children, this is, heartening news, if you will. Where do we draw sort of a line here between how young you can actually start, giving your child a taste of peanut butter or any of these peanut oils, and just how much you have to do to find out that it's going to be okay? Yeah,
absolutely. So just quickly, I would recommend peanut butter, not peanut oils, because the butter has more protein in it, and that's the important thing.
Okay.
So the current recommendations, so as I mentioned, there were a couple sets of guidelines. The most recent ones are from 2021. And what they recommend is that essentially for all children, somewhere between the ages of 4 and 6 months of age, once developmentally appropriate. So now that's a confusing term, but what that means is once they're not going to choke on the food, so they're otherwise ready for solid foods, that you should start introducing these major allergens in small amounts. So for peanut butter, for example, a small amount the size of a pea or the size of your pinky nail is a good amount. You want to introduce it directly to the mouth. You want to observe for 30 to 60 minutes after you do so, and then you want to carry on with your day. Really importantly, once you've introduced peanut into the diet, you want to keep it in the diet. So up to 3 times a week is a good number, and I generally recommend continuing that out to a year of life just to make sure that we've passed the window of food allergy onset for most kids.
Is there an age where we start this at? I mean, from a newborn, from what age roughly?
So it'd be 4 months would be the earliest.
Okay.
that I'd recommend this. 4 to 6 months is sort of the window we're shooting for.
By the way, I need to ask you something else, and my producer noted this. There's this thing online right now on social media, and I don't know whether you've seen this or not, where people concerned about their children, right, are doing this, trying the peanut butter test, if you will, just, on a finger, and feeding it their child while sitting in a parking lot at a hospital, just in case their child does go into shock. And I'm curious what you think of that. Have you seen these?
Well, I am aware of that. Absolutely, it's sort of something that's been sort of practiced, I guess, by families for a while. I would say first and foremost, I understand where that's coming from, right? I understand the anxiety. I understand the fear. And what I would prefer is that families actually recommend or follow the 2021 recommendations, which are, if you're not comfortable doing this at home, we understand that. Have a conversation with your pediatrician about it, right? See if you can do an in-office exposure with your pediatrician. If your pediatrician isn't comfortable with that, refer to allergy, right? That's what we're here for. But it really should be a supervised exposure if there's sort of sufficient level of concern about sort of doing that introduction at home.
One other question I have with relation to food allergies overall, have we seen a decline in overall increase in food allergies?
Yeah. So we did look at both peanut-specific allergy, and then we looked at food allergy to the other major food allergens, milk, soy, wheat, egg, etc. So what we found was that there was a reduction in new-onset peanut allergy, but there was also a reduction in new-onset all-cause food allergy. Now, that reduction was a little bit lower, 36% reduction. But you might ask, why are we seeing reductions in other forms of food allergy if peanut was what the recommendation was for? And I don't know for sure. But, one potential explanation is that peanut has such a cachet about it. There's very appropriate fear and anxiety surrounding peanut. And it could well be that once it was shown that early introduction of peanut was safe and effective, it was sort of a natural extension for families and for providers to recommend introduction of those other food allergens also. Now, I will note, subsequent to the 2015 study, there were a number of other clinical trials that showed that indeed early introduction of milk is helpful, or early introduction of egg is helpful, and that's why in 2021 the recommendations were updated again to say we should actually be doing this early allergen introduction for all of the major allergens.
Good to know, and good advice for parents. Okay. Dr. Hill, I want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Much appreciated.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers.
I think we need something new.
Discover iHeart New Music. Always fresh, always first. Stream now on the free iHeartRadio app.